At a time when freedom was just a dream, and the land burned beneath the boots of British rule. A man rose from among the people, not with a crown, nor in a palace, but with a voice louder than bullets, and a will stronger than steel. That man was George Washington. Leader of the Revolution, founder of the nation, and the first president of a country that would change the face of the world forever. This is not just the story of a man, but the story of the birth of the United States of America. George Washington, a founding father of the United States, led the Continental Army to victory in the Revolutionary War and was America's first president. George Washington was a Virginia plantation owner who served as a general and commander-in-chief of the colonial armies during the American Revolutionary War. Later, he became the first president of the United States, serving from 1789 to 1797. Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was the eldest of Augustine and Mary's 6 children, all of whom survived into adulthood. The family lived on Pope's Creek in Westmoreland County, Virginia, and were moderately prosperous members of Virginia's middling class. Washington could trace his family's presence in North America to his great-grandfather, John Washington, who migrated from England to Virginia. The family held some distinction in England and was granted land by Henry VIII. However, much of the family's wealth in England was lost under the Puritan government of Oliver Cromwell. In 1657, Washington's grandfather, Lawrence Washington, migrated to Virginia. Little is known about the family in North America until Washington's father, Augustine, was born in 1694. Augustine Washington was an ambitious man who acquired land and enslaved people, built mills, and grew tobacco. He had an interest in opening iron mines for a time. He married his first wife, Jane Butler, who died in 1729, and then married Mary Ball in 1731. In 1735, Augustine moved the family to Little Hunting Creek Plantation, which was later renamed Mount Vernon. They moved again in 1738 to Ferry Farm on the Rappahannock River, opposite Fredericksburg, Virginia, where Washington spent much of his youth. Little is known about Washington's childhood, which has led to many fables that later biographers created to fill in the gaps, such as the tales of him throwing a silver dollar across the Potomac or confessing to chopping down his father's prized cherry tree. From age 7 to 15, Washington was homeschooled by the local church sexton and later a schoolmaster in practical math, geography, Latin, and the English classics. He also learned a lot from his acquaintance with woodsmen and the plantation foreman, mastering skills like growing tobacco, stock raising, and surveying. When he was 11, Washington's father died, and he became the ward of his half-brother, Lawrence, who gave him a good upbringing. Lawrence inherited the family's Little Hunting Creek plantation and married in Fairfax, the daughter of Colonel William Fairfax. Under her tutelage, Washington was introduced to the finer aspects of colonial culture. At 16, Washington traveled with a surveying party in Virginia's Western Territory, and by the next year, with the help of Lord Fairfax, he was appointed as the official surveyor of Culpeper County. In the early 1750s, the French and British were at peace, but the French began occupying the Ohio Valley, protecting the king's interests. The borderlands in the region were unclear and led to disputes. Washington showed natural leadership skills and, after Lawrence's death, was appointed adjutant in the Virginia militia with the rank of major by Virginia's lieutenant governor, Robert Dinwiddie. In 1753, Washington was sent to Fort Le Boeuf to warn the French to leave land claimed by Britain. The French refused, and Washington returned to Virginia. He was then sent back with troops, where his small force attacked a French post at Fort Duquesne, killing the commander and taking prisoners. The French retaliated and drove Washington back to his post at Great Meadows, later known as Fort Necessity. Washington eventually surrendered, though he was thanked by the House of Burgesses and his name was mentioned in the London Gazettes. He was made an honorary colonel and joined British General Edward Braddock's army. In 1755, the French and their Indian allies ambushed Braddock's army, mortally wounding him. Washington led the retreat back to safety. In 1755, Washington was made the commander of all Virginia troops at 23 years old. He was sent to protect the frontier, but his assignment was frustrating. His health failed, and in 1757 he was sent home. After returning to duty in 1758, Washington helped capture Fort Duquesne, but a friendly fire incident killed 14 and wounded 26 of his men. Despite this, the British achieved a major victory. Washington retired from the Virginia Regiment in December 1758, and he entered politics by being elected to Virginia's House of Burgesses. In 1759, Washington married Martha Dandridge Custis, a widow with a considerable fortune. Martha's 18,000-acre estate added to Washington's wealth. The marriage also brought Martha's 2 children, John, Jackie, and Martha, Patsy, into his life. He treated them with great affection, though Patsy died before the Revolution, and Jackie died during the war. By the 1790s, Washington kept over 300 enslaved people at Mount Vernon. Though he disliked the institution of slavery, he accepted it as legal. In his will, he ordered that all enslaved people be freed upon Martha's death. However, those enslaved by the Custis family were passed on to Martha's grandchildren. Washington enjoyed a life of leisure, participating in horseback riding, hunting, fishing, and social events. He worked 6 days a week, often taking off his coat to perform manual labor. Washington's dental issues were well documented. By the time of his presidency, he had only one natural tooth left. His dentures were not made of wood, as is often claimed, but from human teeth, including those of enslaved people, ivory, animal teeth, and metal. His dental problems likely contributed to his somber demeanor. Though initially opposed to colonial independence, Washington gradually became an active member of the resistance. He introduced a resolution to boycott British goods in 1769 and in 1774, chaired a meeting that adopted the Fairfax Resolves, calling for the Continental Congress to convene. He was selected as a delegate to the First Continental Congress in March 1775. After the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775, the political dispute between Great Britain and her North American colonies escalated into an armed conflict. In May, Washington traveled to the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia dressed in a military uniform, indicating that he was prepared for war. On June 15, he was appointed Major General and Commander-in-Chief of the colonial forces against Great Britain. As was his custom, he did not seek out the office of commander, but he faced no serious competition. Washington was the best choice for a number of reasons. He had the prestige, military experience, and charisma for the job, and he had been advising Congress for months. Another factor was political. The Revolution had started in New England, and at the time, they were the only colonies that had directly felt the brunt of British tyranny. Virginia was the largest British colony, and New England needed Southern colonial support. Washington's military training was not extensive in the methods required to face a modern European army, but his frontier experience and tactical mind allowed him to compensate. Despite having no formal experience with large-scale armies, cavalry, or artillery, Washington's courage, determination, and strategic intelligence helped him keep one step ahead of the enemy. Washington's first notable victory came in March 1776, when he forced the British to withdraw from Boston by placing artillery above the city on Dorchester Heights. He then moved his troops into New York City, only to face a major challenge in the summer of 1776 when a new British commander, Sir William Howe, launched a campaign against the colonies. In August 1776, the British Army took New York City after a series of decisive battles. Washington's army was routed, suffering the surrender of 2,800 men. Forced to retreat across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania, Washington's army was near collapse. However, he managed to capitalize on the Christmas holiday by leading a daring attack across the Delaware River on the unsuspecting Hessian mercenaries stationed at Trenton. The attack was successful, and Washington's troops continued their offensive by defeating the British again at Princeton a few days later. General Howe, the British commander, believed that capturing key colonial cities like Philadelphia and New York would suppress the rebellion. Despite early losses, Washington continued to regroup and launch counterattacks. After Howe's capture of Philadelphia in 1777, Washington led his troops to defend the city but was defeated at the Battle of Brandywine. In a major shift, British General John Burgoyne's attempt to divide the colonies by marching south from Quebec to Saratoga ended in disaster when his forces were trapped by American troops. The victory at Saratoga was pivotal, leading to French support for the American cause. The winter of 1777 at Valley Forge tested Washington and his army like no other. Thousands of soldiers died from disease and harsh conditions, but the army remained intact and prepared to fight again. The British command, realizing their strategy had failed, withdrew from Philadelphia, and Washington's army delivered several successful engagements against the retreating British. By 1781, Washington's forces, with the support of the French Army and Navy, cornered British General Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. The surrender of Cornwallis on October 19, 1781, marked the decisive end to the war. Though there were still British troops in other locations, the victory at Yorktown sealed the fate of the American Revolution. The war officially ended in 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, granting the United States its independence. Washington formally resigned from his position as commander-in-chief and returned to his estate at Mount Vernon, hoping to resume his life as a farmer. In 1787, with the country struggling under the Articles of Confederation, Washington was called back into public service. At the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, he was unanimously elected president of the convention. He played a pivotal role in shaping the new Constitution, which aimed to address the weaknesses of the existing government structure. Washington was elected as the first president of the United States in 1789. His presidency set many precedents, including the establishment of the executive branch and the creation of the presidential cabinet. He chose to be known simply as Mr. President, rejecting titles like Your Excellency, to avoid monarchy-like airs. During his presidency, Washington faced many challenges, including managing the nation's debt and handling foreign relations, particularly the ongoing conflict between Britain and France. Washington's decision to remain neutral in the conflict between these European powers, particularly through the Jay Treaty, helped preserve American interests. In 1791, Washington signed legislation imposing a tax on distilled spirits, which led to widespread unrest in Pennsylvania, culminating in the Whiskey Rebellion. Washington responded decisively, leading federal troops to quell the rebellion, thus demonstrating the power of the federal government to enforce its laws. Throughout his presidency, Washington was troubled by the rise of political parties, especially between Alexander Hamilton's Federalists and Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. He believed that partisan politics could divide the country and warned against its dangers in his farewell address. In 1796, after 2 terms in office, Washington chose to retire from public life, setting the precedent for future presidents. In his farewell address, he urged the nation to avoid entangling alliances and political factions, emphasizing the importance of national unity. After stepping down as president, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, where he continued his agricultural pursuits. Despite the challenges of aging and the decline of his health, he remained a revered figure in American history. Washington's leadership during the American Revolution and his presidency laid the foundation for the United States and its democratic system of government, solidifying his legacy as one of the nation's founding fathers. And so, the name of George Washington is not merely a line in the pages of history, but an everlasting symbol of wise leadership, sacrifice for principles, and the birth of a nation's dream. His legacy still lives on in the hearts of those who believe in freedom and justice. As we look back to draw inspiration, Washington remains the guiding star that lit the path of an entire nation toward a brighter future. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos.